All right, so again, I'm excited to be here today. We are going to look over what it means to proctor one of NHA's high stakes certification exams, and also discuss some things that you should know prior to running an exam. Now, before we do that, I'm actually going to put a poll out in there. Let's see. I'm just going to ask. There we go. We're wanting to find out a little bit about you, and we're wondering kind of what is the program type that you're affiliated with, or what is your role? That might be a better way to put that. So go ahead and read through these different options that you can see out on your poll and select the one that is the most likely aligned. And if there's something different, let's post that in the chat and let us know kind of who's with us today. Great. Got about half of you already. Great job. I love seeing these things come in real time. Thank you. See, someone posted hospital partnered with NHA. Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll down, and it looks kind of like we've got a pretty consistent view across just about everything here. So that's great. I'm just excited to see who is with us today. So let's go ahead and jump in. So we're going to review all of the resources and tools that you have available to you to help make sure that exam day for both you and your candidates is as successful as possible. So these are the general topics we're going to go over. And as you have questions, again, please post those in the Q&A box so that we can get them all answered. So I do want to just start by letting you know that we are fully invested in the success for you and your learners. We know that proctoring, if it's your first time, can be a little bit scary, but we're here to make sure that your exam day is a successful one. Oop, my screen froze. Hold on just a second. There we go. So we just want to level set real quick and relay that only NHA resources that require a proctored exam are those 8 nationally accredited certification tests that are available for your candidates. Of these 8, the only one that cannot be run on site at your institution is going to be the pharmacy technician exam. We have to adhere to Board of Pharmacy requirements, and that means that this has to be run through a third-party testing company. Now, it's possible that your location is an approved third-party testing site with our vendor that we use for this, which is PSI. So if not, or if your location does want to become a PSI testing site, that is something you'd need to address directly with that company, with PSI. The material that we're going to cover today is not related to third-party testing. We do have a third-party testing webinar coming up, actually, I think next week. So take a look on our website and register for that if you have additional questions. For a little bit of background, PSI is NHA's selected third-party testing resource, and we've partnered with for more than a decade. Your candidates who are testing, again, with pharmacy tech, or who may need off-site testing or remote testing will use this resource to schedule and take those exams. Proctoring exams on site does not make you a PSI proctor, nor do you schedule those exams. But as an employee of your institution, you have the option to proctor exams live on campus, depending on your role. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. The first step to proctoring one of these exams is actually becoming a proctor, but not everyone can or should proctor a high-stakes exam. NHA has what's called the Proctor Handbook. This is available out on our website and in our help center, and it covers the basics of who should and shouldn't proctor, what it means to proctor, and making sure that everything is ready for exam day. This is a really important document to understand what proctoring is and the security measures around the process. For any of your questions that are like what to do if a candidate is caught cheating or what needs to be in the testing room, this is your first place to look. The Proctor Handbook will walk you through, again, who should or shouldn't proctor and what it means to have what we call a conflict of interest. That's the legal way to say that you have too much stake in the successful outcome of the exam. So people who can proctor, as long as they're over 18, are people in other departments. If you have already a dedicated testing center or technology center, an employee from either of those, or even an administrative assistant or a librarian. Now, conflict of interest means that no one who is in the classroom with the candidates or program administrators, directors, anyone who has a lot of direct contact with that candidate and maybe just a little too involved, these people should not be in the testing room at all during the exam, let alone proctoring it. So also take note of some of the other pieces for proctoring, such as the proctor-candidate ratio, who can or can't test on site, and when you might not be eligible to proctor due to perhaps preparing for the exam yourself. Now, to become a proctor, the first thing you need to do is be invited to your NHA account from an existing administrator. You'll receive an email to log in for the first time where you can establish your login details. Make sure it's one you'll remember. This is important because if you'll use this login on exam day. Now from here, you can complete the proctor training, which should only take around 15 to 20 minutes of your time, but will walk you through all of the steps and ethical requirements. This should be completed as soon as you can, ideally at least 30 days before the exam, but preferably no later than 10 days beforehand so that you have enough time to familiarize yourself with your tools and ensure the testing space will be ready on exam day. When you first log in at nhanow.com, you can see a prompt to become a proctor right at the top of your screen. This training will need to be renewed annually, but only if you are still proctoring. You will receive reminder emails to renew your proctor training when the time is right. But if you're no longer responsible to proctor, just ignore them. Only complete the training the next year if you're still in this same role. But what do proctors even do? Well, you're not just sitting there staring at candidates during an exam. You're responsible to prepare the exam room, print off rosters, confirm candidate identities to that roster, ensuring their names match what's on their government-issued photo ID, first and last name. And most importantly, actively monitor the candidates during the test. If there are any issues or irregularities, which could include perhaps an instance of cheating, or even if the power goes out during an exam, you will be responsible to submit an incident form so NHA can address anything that we may need, from withdrawing a certification to resetting an exam availability for a candidate. You will not be proctoring remotely. Candidates can't take an exam with you via Zoom or through any online format. NHA uses PSI for remote tests, so please do not attempt to proctor if the candidates aren't physically with you in the room. You also don't have the authority to extend test times or provide any accommodation needs without NHA's advance approval. We're going to talk about this in more detail in a minute, but if a candidate needs to submit a request for an accommodation because of an ADA compliant need, they have a 504 on file or a letter from a physician, that is the candidate's responsibility to do at least a month before the exam date. You must physically stay in the testing room for the duration of the exam, unless there's an alternative proctor available to relieve you. Exam dates also do need to be created in advance. Candidates should have their applications done no later than the week before the test. Not every person through your institution may have the authority to build those exam dates, so we're going to talk through that a little bit more in a bit. You are also not responsible to register candidates for their exams. That is something they need to do. During the application process, a candidate signs a legal form called an attestation, confirming their identity, their ethical responsibility, and eligibility to test. Again, this should happen no later than the week before the test. And hopefully this one makes sense. You should not be answering questions about the exam during the test. That's kind of the wrong thing to do. Okay, so what's allowed in the exam room? Well, each candidate can have 2 sheets of blank paper, which you will provide and also collect at the end of the exam. They are also able to have 2 number 2 pencils, which they should bring. They cannot have access to any other resources in the exam room, with the only exception, the billing and coding test. That's the certified billing and coding specialist. Those candidates currently are required to bring their 3 coding manuals into the exam room. Now, these can have handwritten notes in them, as well as tabs on pages, but they cannot be an ebook or include any inserts. These would need to be removed before the start of the exam. Other items that are not allowed would include any personal items like a cell phone, coat, or purse, but exceptions should be made for religious clothing. In addition, there's no food or drink allowed during the exam unless pre-approved through an accommodation for medical purposes. And candidates cannot bring in their own calculators. All necessary calculations will have resources available within the exam format. Okay, so I'm going to ask another quick poll. Let's see. Where are you with your proctor training? I'm just curious for those of you who are here. Have you completed this already? Have you not yet completed it? And if there's something else that might apply to you, let us know. Post that in the chat for us. Let's see who's with us today. A little over half of you, all right. It looks like the majority of you have already completed or recently completed your proctor training. Great. And for the rest of you, no worries. There's probably time. I'm sure it only takes about 15 minutes to do if you're eligible. So I'm going to go ahead and close that one down. Thanks so much, you guys. All right. So with those of you who have already completed your training, hopefully a lot of what we're about to cover is review, but let's talk about the resources available to you as a proctor for your program. So once you've completed the proctor training, you then will also have access to the proctor manual. It's also called the process guide. This manual is your direct roadmap to the exam process and is what you'll use before and during the exam to make sure everything is in order. It is a downloadable PDF that also includes the entire proctor script. It has resource links and information about any testing irregularities and what to do about them. NHA's Help Center is also here for you to cover a variety of needs. We have our live chat and 800 number who are available to answer emergency questions. Though they do run extended hours, they are not 24-hour and are closed on national holidays. So if you have a test coming up on a 3-day weekend, look ahead. Make sure everything is set up. This is also on our Help Center where you'll locate any incident forms, technical requirements for testing computers, FAQs. You can also access, and actually it looks a little bit different than this now, and I'll show you what it looks like now. You can also access the manual as well as the proctor handbook from here. So to help you with all of these processes, also through our NHA website, you have our searchable library. So this is what it looks like now. It's a searchable library that's also called the Knowledge Center. It's the same as the Help Center. And all of those walkthroughs on becoming, renewing your proctor status, a video on the proctor process. We've got all kinds of resources there for you to look at and search and prepare with how-to documents also for your learners that include what to do to reschedule their exam or if they need to test third party. So that Help Center, the Knowledge Center, lots of resources for you. So let's take a look at some of the best practices for a successful exam day. Be sure to have a few things ready, like the proctor manual and also the test plans for the exam you'll be proctoring. During the test script, you need to inform candidates of how long the exam is and how many questions there are, and that information is found on the test plan. Also, be sure to have noted the live chat feature on your website to ensure in case of emergency or urgent need that you have access to our client care team. Again, our Help Center is available on our website. They are not 24 hours, so just be aware of when those times are for your exams. One of the key pieces for you to know is when exams are scheduled, as well as how many candidates will be attending. You can do this from your NHA login by selecting the Upcoming Exams button. This will take you to your institution's exam calendar. That calendar will default to a view of a 30-day window, but you can stretch it out to 90 days. This page gives you all the information you need about the upcoming exams, starting with the exam date. This date is when the exam will run for you and for your candidates. You will also see the application deadline. This is the last day that candidates can apply for the exam, and it should be the week before the test, technically 8 days before. All applications should be done prior to 11:59 p.m. on this date in order to test the following week. You can also see how many candidates are on that roster out of how many are the maximum available. This is important to know how many proctors you will need. The proctor to candidate ratio should never exceed 25 candidates to a single proctor. You will see what exams may be running at this time, so you want to make sure and check the length and question number from those test plans to be sure you provide your candidates the correct information. Now, for any open exams, there is the option to edit the test, but that permission, again, is available only for those with permission to create a new exam. The exam status is really important. As you can see here, we've got tests in sent, closed, and open. So that sent status is the right one for the exam to be live on exam day. If that test doesn't go through the final phase of processing, it will remain in a closed status, as you can see here. In this instance, when you show up to proctor, there wouldn't be an exam available for you. Now, this is easy to fix, but has to be done by an NHA staff member. So much better to discover before exam day, especially if you're testing over a weekend. Keep an eye on this page to make sure that this status transitions from closed to sent, which should happen automatically 4 days before the exam. Check your exam statuses after that 4-day window to make sure everything is ready to go. The exam roster needs to be finalized prior to the exam, and you will need to have this printed to have documentation of your candidates and confirm their information on test day. So you can access that through the exam rosters feature. Just select the exam date that you need from that drop-down list, and then you can click on the link in the bottom right corner to print the roster. Now, if for some reason the roster looks weird or wrong, take note of the existing filter in the top right corner. If this is set to pending approval, then you might not see all candidates on that list. So be sure to check that this is filtered to approved candidates so your roster is accurate. On exam day, again, you will use this document to confirm their names. And remember, they have to match their government-issued photo ID with their first and last name. Only that candidate can take that exam. So if the names don't match, then they shouldn't be allowed to test. Now, if you have permissions to schedule an exam, this feature, again, isn't available to everyone. So if you're supposed to do that, but do not see the ability to request a new exam live for you, or if it's crossed out on the website, please connect with your institution to see if your administrative privileges need to be updated. But selecting this should open your information page and type in your required exam dates to select the application deadline. And then the calendar can help you with that. So you want to make sure it's 8 days prior to the exam. And you need to make sure everything is set up correctly. And then you put in the registration deadline. You will also have some open fields to complete if you choose. So note that these are optional, except for the maximum number. Oh, that is on the wrong thing. So maximum number of allowed. I wonder if I can move that in real time. Hold on. We're going to just go. Maybe not. It's all right. So the maximum number allowed is actually at the top of the screen. As you can see here, that is required because there's an asterisk there. This is a total count that your testing center or location can accommodate during a single exam. But then you see here the exam details. So this is where it's optional. If you want any information visible to the candidates during the application process, for example, the morning class or afternoon class, or the start time of the exam, or even room it's going to be located in. This could be an instructor's name, even. That's what you'd want to put here. Now, the next item, again, that's optional are purchase order numbers. These aren't used for everyone. So if a PO does need to be in a final invoice, be sure it's listed now. Again, we can't do a PO after the exam. Look, that's where my arrow was. It was late. Sorry about that. That's your max number of applications allowed. The bottom of this page, when you scroll down, will give you the option to select the exam or exams that will run at this time. Please note candidates cannot select more than one test at a time. If concurrent exams need to be run, there are some specifications in the Proctor Handbook to address timeline requirements. It's also important to note that not all tests run the same amount of time. Our medical assistant and billing and coding tests, for example, both run for a 3-hour window, whereas other tests may only be 2 hours long. Running multiple exams at the same time that are different timelines can cause an issue if you're the only proctor. There are guidelines around when candidates can leave the room. And so when or if multiple exam types are running, it can cause some disturbance during the test, which might cause undue stress for the learners. If you're editing an exam date, certain fields may be locked depending on if there are any active applications. So once the applications are live, they can't let you change something that might impact that learner. If you do need to at that point, that's when you would want to follow up with your NHA representative. Now, you are not responsible to reschedule a candidate application. Anyone who misses an exam needs to go through their own candidate account to reschedule the test. Your institution needs to have an open test date available for them to do so, but you can't change a candidate's registration for them. For on-site exams, rescheduling does not charge the candidates. There's no additional cost there. But for anyone testing offsite through our third-party testing, if they miss an exam, that's not necessarily the case. They have to reschedule that exam at least 24 hours before their scheduled test date, or they may forfeit the exam cost and would have to pay again. If you have a candidate or candidates who can't remember their personal login passwords at the start of the exam, you will have the option to help them. Now, this is only applicable for on-site exams, not through PSI or remote testing. But if you are actively proctoring, you can help in this already very stressful situation. You do need to be logged in to the exam as a proctor, and then just select the Generate Password Reset Code feature up at the top. A 12-digit alphanumeric code will appear that you can share with test takers. This code will expire in 30 minutes. So after that point, if you need a new one, just make a new code, no big deal. Candidates then follow the forgot password prompt on their account and select the option for during a proctored exam. And then they can confirm that they are in fact in the room. They're instructed to let you as the proctor know that this is happening. And then they answer 3 verification questions from their own account. Questions like their street address or birth date. And with successful answers, they're able to then enter the access code you created, which will then grant them access to their portal and allow you to begin their exam. Now, you can create this code in advance of the exam start if you want, put it up on a board or something for all to see, or create it just as or if needed. Though applicable for any candidate in the testing space at that time, remember it's only valid for a 30-minute window, so plan accordingly. Okay, so I wanted to just take a little pause here. Have we had any major questions, team, come in that we want to maybe answer live right now before we keep going?
There's one in the chat, and the question is, what do we do with the IDs after confirming the ID match? Is there certain places they have to send them, or?
Great question. So you don't do anything with the ID itself, but you're just confirming that they match. Now, that is documentation that you might want to keep at your institution for your own records. We do not require them. When you sign in, you also sign an attestation that says that you've done these things, you've met those ethical requirements, and that's where NHA allows you to be able to proctor on site. So I would just, I would save them if your institution wants to, but you don't have to. It's a great question.
And there was another one earlier on, Laura, that if they have a candidate who has English as a second language and they have a question about the meaning of a word, can we direct them or help them with this?
Oof, that is a really great question. Unfortunately, no, you are not allowed to answer questions about the exam during the exam. So that's just not one of the things that you are able to do. So for those learners who might be English as a second language, we know that that's a struggle. A lot of our NHA resources that are available to purchase or provide to your learners do have some tools built in for multi-learning pathways, but English as a second language is not considered an ADA compliant issue, and so the exam itself will be in English, as are our resources. Maybe during Q&A we can talk a little bit more about that, but that's a really good question, and unfortunately the answer is no.
That's all we have for right now, Laura. Thank you.
All right. All right, well, let's keep going. So there are going to be scenarios when an exam may need to be stopped or is stopped automatically due to what we call a candidate event, like clicking outside of the browser. These are all documented, and it's up to the proctor's discretion to allow the individual to return to the exam. At the start of an exam, you will see the option to stop proctoring, approve or deny a candidate beginning an exam. Stop proctoring will close but not finalize the assessment. It will take you back to your main dashboard. You'd use this if the exam needs to be halted for everyone, like a fire drill or tornado warning. Approve and deny are to grant or turn down the ability to begin an exam. Now, deny is not a permanent action, and the candidate can request access to the exam again if you accidentally click the wrong one. As the exam continues, if there are any candidate events, and depending on how many of those occur for a given person, additional action items are available. The reason for the action is visible to you as the proctor. In this instance, the candidate clicked outside the browser. Depending on the situation, ignore might be the right action, which will allow the candidate to continue. As the exam continues, if there are any candidate events, and depending on how many, right, there may be additional items. You have the option to also, let me just go through, we went ignore, there it is, abandon the exam. Selecting this will give you a prompt outlining what this action does. Close, for example, will close and score the assessment. The candidate has been caught cheating. This is the appropriate course of action, followed by the proctor submitting an incident form to NHA. But I want to talk a little bit about abandon. Though available, this button is not one that you should select in any circumstances. Pressing the abandon button will immediately terminate the exam, and all responses that test taker has provided up to that point will be deleted. The test taker will then need to be rescheduled for a new exam date and will be required to begin the exam again. Now, if you accidentally press this button, please contact NHA immediately. The sooner you do, the more likely we will be able to help minimize the impact or possible additional fees for you, not for you, but for the candidate or for the institution. So 3 different options: ignore, close, and abandon. Okay, so now that we've seen sort of the process, let's take a look at the best timeline for the exam. We want to review everything we've talked about, but we're going to get to the frequently asked questions as well. So we're going to take the major players of the countdown prior to an exam date, one at a time, knowing, of course, that programs do vary in different lengths. So your involvement really doesn't start until around 30 days before the exam date. We'll count down each week and take a look at the day before the exam itself. So around this time, 3 to 4 weeks before the test, you should begin or have already completed your proctor training. If you need or want any additional training, reach out to your NHA representative to request that that's completed with our client experience team. Now, the survey you're going to get at the end will have the option to request that if you know right now you'd like to have that. So fill that survey out. It's also a good idea to have a backup proctor just in case something happens and you aren't able to proctor the exam. You'll want to log into your account, check the upcoming exams field, which we looked at, to be sure the test date is already created. Ideally, candidates should already be starting their applications. Remember, this isn't something you do, but you're able to watch as they've applied for the upcoming exams button. This is important to know how many proctors you'll need on exam day. As I mentioned earlier, anyone who may be eligible to request a special accommodation should do this now. Now, it's not your responsibility to submit, and you can't grant or approve special accommodations. These must be submitted by the candidate in advance with adequate documentation, like an IEP or 504 for a school, a letter from a physician, an official letter, and then it gets reviewed internally here at NHA with our compliance department. Candidates who are approved often need to have their exam date rescheduled so that their needs can be accommodated. They will communicate with the institution. You will also, whoever is identified as the responsible partner at the institution will be communicated with. So it's up to you to implement that accommodation. So be sure to check with your institution if there are any additional needs. 2 weeks before your scheduled proctoring exam is the right time to review all your resources, your how-to guides, video walkthroughs, read through the proctor handbook and manual so you can address any possible issues or the testing space. This also includes making sure your IT team has reviewed the technical requirements to test and all computers are equipped. Candidates, again, should be applying or already completed their applications at this point, which you can monitor through the upcoming exams field. And again, any accommodations that have been approved are the institutions, so likely your responsibility to implement. And by this time, candidates should be in communication with NHA and know if they have any accommodations needing any special assistance or a different exam date, if they have to have an alternative room, even a reader, someone to read the questions out loud potentially. We just want to make sure that all is ready and set up so that they can be taken care of. The week before the exam is when registration closes for candidates. Anyone who has not yet applied by this time will need to have an alternative or additional test date created for them. Based on the now visible roster, check to see if there will be any need for additional proctors, if there's a backup in case something happens, or if there are more than 25 candidates, what does that look like? And this is the right time to look further at the proctor handbook and manual. Make sure the room will be well equipped to handle all the needs, connecting with your IT team again. Now, the day before the test, you've done all of these things. You should feel really confident that everything is ready to go. Make sure the room is set up according to the proctor handbook. At this time, the proctor manual will begin to give you directions so you know what to do. And the first is to verify the exam roster, which you should be able to print off of the NHA website and will hold all the candidate names. If anyone is missing from your roster, they didn't apply in time and will need to have an alternative testing date set up for them. If there are any discrepancies, for example, someone on the roster who shouldn't be, then you need to contact the NHA prior to test day to make sure it gets fixed. Refer to the technical requirements in our help center and ensure that all computers, including the proctor station, meet the minimum requirements. Verify that pop-up blockers are turned off, and so we can have everything ready for testing. Now, the proctor handbook has all of this, including any additional room requirements, such as a working wall clock that will be visible to all exam candidates and proctors. Prepare any additional supplies, such as scratch paper. If you want to provide pencils, they're supposed to bring them, but you can, that they're ready available to have for exam day. For example, for auditing purposes, scratch papers need to be numbered following the proctor manual guidelines. And you'll need to review the test plan for the exam you're proctoring so you can relay to candidates how many questions and the length of the exam. Big day on exam day before the test starts. Have your proctor manual nearby to be sure you know your login and password to get into the website. You are probably on a different computer in the testing space and it won't have your saved information, so you want to make sure you double check that. Check in your proctor exams field on your login that the exam is listed and available to run. Remember, if the exam status listed in the upcoming exams field says closed or open, then it didn't finalize and you'll need to contact NHA to get that done. Have your exam roster printed and verify that all candidates are eligible to take the test. Confirm with the proper identification, government-issued photo ID with their signature and permanent address. First and last names are what we need. If necessary, assign the scratch paper following the proctor manual guidelines, and advise that all candidates make sure they know their passwords, get that password reset generated. Or also, this is important, use the restroom. Make sure you do too before the start of the test so that we don't have any unnecessary breaks. So following the proctor script and the proctor manual helps make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. Log in to your NHA exam, have everything ready to identify the candidates, and then monitor them at all times using both the exam feature on the website, as well as physical observation. Occasionally move around the room during the test. We have found that monitoring candidates from the back of the testing space can provide a good point of view for observing their activity. When the test is over, collect all scratch paper from any candidates. If you're the only proctor in the exam room, they can't leave once the testing begins, except for emergencies. And all candidates need to wait. They can leave early if they finish, but if they're within 15 minutes of the exam time being done, they need to wait before they can leave the room. Okay, I'm going to ask another quick poll here. Here we go. So, what do you think is the most common question that we get from proctors on exam day? We get all of these, but what do you think is the most common issue or question? Is it closing or reopening an exam, assisting or viewing rosters, rescheduling candidates, confirming eligibility, or resetting passwords? What do you guys think is the most common question we get from proctors on exam day? Okay, got about half of you there. Take a minute. Anybody else want to guess? You're going to find out. I'm going to tell you, but we're just going to guess here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that down. So we have a tie between help in adding, closing, or reopening exams or resetting passwords. Well, the answer is 45% of inbound questions on proctoring are related to opening, closing, or adding exam dates. It's the single largest question that we get. If you don't see that request new exam feature, if it's crossed out for you, then you just need to talk to your institution to get that feature added or activated for your account. All right, so we've looked at the process. What we're going to do now is talk about some of the most frequent questions we get or issues that could arise during an exam experience. So something we get, I'm supposed to proctor an exam today, but there are no sessions showing when I click proctor exams. So remember we said to look at the upcoming exams field, right? You want to check that status. If it is in closed or open, then it won't populate for you. So you need to have it turned over to a sent status. This should happen automatically, but if an exam had to be manipulated, reopened, or whatever, after it already had closed, that might not occur automatically. So that's when that might possibly happen. So just double check that. I'm stuck on the proctor signature page. I can't get past. Well, we recently did some upgrades, so this shouldn't happen, but just in case, make sure that the name is correct. It's the full name set up in your profile, and that you type the date format as the full month, date, year. That should auto-populate for you. It's a default setting to do that, but if for some reason it isn't, then that's what would happen. My candidates log into their exam and they're getting a message that there is no proctor available. Well, yeah, if you haven't logged in yet, that's what they'll be told. So we want to make sure that you have logged in. If they receive that message, just have them refresh their page once you've logged in and are ready to go. Now, if they're getting that and you're logged in, that might be an issue. So contact our customer service. I have to proctor multiple exams at the same time. How do I do that? You can absolutely do that. Basically, you are able to add in multiple exam versions to your exam. There should be next to the stop proctoring, kind of an ellipses, some 3 items that will give you some options. And one of them is to choose additional assessments. So you'd be able to see other tests running that same day and be able to open and monitor all learners from this same space. Now, this did change recently, upgrade, right? Way better now. So you should not have to have multiple browsers open. You should be able to monitor all learners from any exam you're proctoring on the exact same page. All right, also, let's see. Oh, sorry, that's a little highlight just so you can see it. So my candidate's exam stopped because they accidentally clicked outside of the browser. Well, if it was an accident, you know it was an accident, you can select ignore. The candidate may need to refresh their page. I might ask them to log back in. You just hit resume. Candidates have up to 3 what we call events that occur where ignore is the only action needed. After 3 events, the exam will close for the candidate, and they'd have to reattest to their testing expectations to resume. Now, ideally, that doesn't happen because if they have more than 3 events, something else might be going on, but that's up to the proctor's discretion. Something's wrong with the candidate's computer and they need to log off or change computers. Totally fine, right? Just have them get into a different computer as quickly as possible. You'll be able to hit resume and they'll be able to pick up where they left off. But their exam time will continue to count down. So we want to make sure this happens as quickly as possible. One of the best ways to do this is always have at least one backup computer that is not something that candidates can apply for. So if you have, for example, 10 computers in your testing space, only allow up to 8 candidates at a time to test. So we have 2 empty backup computers if necessary. It's just a pro tip. I had to stop the assessment. Can we restart? Absolutely. Log back in, have your candidates do the same. They will show up under stopped assessments and you'll be able to resume and pick up where they left off. My candidate has questions to go back and review. How does this work? Well, candidates can flag questions, and at the end, before they submit, they do get a prompt to, do you want to go back and review flagged questions? So at this time, a flagged question may not be seen as a submitted question. So that's where we want to make sure that they do go back and review them if they can. Otherwise, it's possible that that question might be answered as wrong because it wasn't officially submitted. So just be aware they can, absolutely. There's a prompt for them to do so. They can finalize without doing it, but it might be at their penalty. So a candidate didn't show up. Can I allow a different candidate who isn't on the roster to test instead? No. Only the candidates who are on that roster can take this exam. They are unique to that person, and we do not want this to happen. The candidate who showed up that day might not even have completed their attestation. They'll need to review their exam options and ensure they're ready to go for a different test date. A candidate can't remember their password. What can I do? Remember? You can help them. Once you're logged in and begin proctoring, you can have that reset button available. Helps you through creating that password code and providing what they need. We do have a how-to for this in our how-to space. Now, remember, this is only applicable for in-person proctored exams, not for PSI tests or remote tests. So they can fill in all that password reset and go all the way through to get it updated. Those are our FAQs that we have, that were the most common questions that we get. So for those who can stick with us, we're going to open up into Q&A here in just a little bit. But before we do, we're going to post 2 survey links in the chat. One of them is going to be, thank you, Lauren, a webinar survey. If you would like additional training, your NHA contact to reach out to you, that's the one you want to fill out. And you'll be put into a raffle for a $50 gift card. So great, but also give us your feedback. Now, the second one that's got the larger gift card raffle, that is actually a survey about you. We'd love to hear more about you, your role, how NHA can help, and that will put you into a second raffle. You can do both for a $500 gift card. So go ahead, open those up right now. I'll get to it. All right, so we're going to do a final check-in and see what questions have come in as we wrapped up.
We do not have any additional questions at this time.
Okay. Oh, I see one popped in. Hold on. There it is. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let's see. We have 2 administrative assistants for MA, PCT, and EKG certifications. Can they be proctors? It's a great question. We do leave the discretion of conflict of interest up to the institution. So I would just recommend that you go to the proctor handbook, read through, and I can actually show you where that is and how to find it. So remember I mentioned the help center has a slightly different view now than what that image was. So here is our searchable knowledge center. And I'm just going to pull up the proctor handbook, right? You just type it in. There it is. We open this handbook up. This is all the guides around what it is to be a proctor, who can or can't proctor. So if we scroll down, Here we go. Conflict of interest. This is what you'd want to read through. Read through it with them. Generally speaking, administrative assistants are acceptable, but we do want you to just double check and make sure that none of these other pieces might apply, might have an issue. So great question. I'll let you answer it. How's that? Can we proctor for our own instructors to test and renew their certification? Ooh, great question. So no, at the institution level. So for example, if you're a school and your teacher, your instructor at that institution also needs to be certified under NHA, which we don't require, but I know some states do and programs do. That there's a special process actually in our candidate handbook, which you can also find in this space, the candidate handbook, about if you're testing as an instructor in that situation, or if you're testing in that space, they have to test third party, register independently, as they're not a learner or underneath your program, they're an administrator. So any administrator who also needs to have a certification has to test independently. Now we can help you with that. The institution can still pay for it if we want. Just follow up with your NHA representative to get that officially done. But that's a great question. And no, the conflict of interest there is a little bit too tight. So we wouldn't want that to happen. These are great questions, you guys. So it doesn't look like we have any more coming in. I'm going to go ahead and just say, oh, wait, we got one more. Do we have a desktop computers or laptop? Tablet? Tablet is absolutely not going to be compliant. That's going to be in the IT specifications. It has to be a computer supplied by the institution. Whether or not it's a laptop, it will probably be defined in our technical requirements, which again, we can just go take a look at here. Let's see, technical, what are the requirements? Oh no, that's not what we want. Technical system requirements. It might also be in the Proctor handbook. Let's see. It's a great question. Probably have a lot with the word computer in here, but that's okay. Let's see. I believe, and I might, okay. Oh, here it is. Only institutional computers not provided by may be used. Must be equipped with a keyboard, mouse, and display of sufficient size. It does not necessarily say it can't be a laptop, but it does need to be an institution provided. So that's a great question. Why are flag questions considered incorrect? You know what? That's a really good question, Nancy. Why are flagged questions considered incorrect? Because they're not submitted. If a question is flagged, it can still be changed. So once you move forward with a question, it's locked. You can't change a submitted answer. So if it's a flagged question, it's still a question you can edit. So it's not officially submitted to the test, if that makes sense. Great question. Do you recommend sitting in on a proctoring session before doing one solo? I think that's up to you and your comfort level. If you feel that would be necessary, great. I would actually recommend the easiest resource that we have is, again, in our help center. And we can go to, I'm just going to go into this resources space and proctoring resources. There's a really easy, quick video that you can watch, which does walk you through the process. So I would start there. And then if you still feel a little bit wobbly about doing it on your own, then yeah, go ahead and set that up. I think that'd be fine. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to everyone who's here. I'm going to pause the recording, but we'll stick around and answer a few more questions as needed. So just to let you know, I want to thank everyone for being here so much for your time. We will answer a few more questions, but please fill out that survey so that we can get your feedback and on anything else that we can help you with. From all of us here at NHA, thank you so much for all of your hard work.